What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Glenda?
Yes.
We have to do a new ad.
We do.
It's a solemn time. Mm-hmm. Our long-time sponsor of the show, George Kittredge,
Yes.
very, very sadly passed away. And we formerly used to advertise for him his Rowdy Hound boxes.
We did.
So we don't actually know what's happened with Rowdy Hound boxes. You know anything about that?
I looked at the website. It said that they're recalibrating since their founder and boss has passed. But nonetheless, I think that you and I want to honour the memory of George Kittredge anyway. He was a friend to both of us, a hell of a good guy, and he supported us almost immediately. He was on board through and through, and I just don't want any of us to forget George. He was a terrific human being.
So we intend to continue to advertise Rowdy Hound, even though we don't know what's going on with them.
Yep.
In the hopes that they keep going, and that can be a bit of George's legacy that we're able to continue to promote.
I hope so.
In checking it out, we had a look to see, because we're not real good with the sponsorship. So we had a look to see who's actually paying for sponsorship. And we have a list of people to tell you that we support. And the first is our sugar mama, Barbara de Groot.
She's been with us from the start as well. Barbara's been an absolute staple in our...
She's a gem.
She is a gem.
She has a business.
She does. From the Heart Dog Training.
From the Heart Dog Training.
Yeah.
You can check it out. But she supports us as much and more than anybody ever has. So we appreciate you very much, Barbara. Another person who's supported us from the start.
The Einzelwiener.
Einzelwiener.
The Bullfed.
The Bullfed.
Yep.
It's where I get all my stuff.
Yeah.
It is, truly. It's where I get all my dog gear. If I need something, Jason's my first point of call. I don't use his shit website. He has a website. It's dog shit. I just message him directly. You guys probably should use his shit website, but I don't.
Yeah, because you don't want to message him directly and get his grumpy ire of the day.
Yeah, but do it. Get all your dog stuff from Jason. He's got everything you need. He's got all the shit that you need to train a dog for realty.
Everybody who comes to seminars and looks at meals and asks me meals questions, ask Jason.
Yeah.
Jason can point you in the right direction for getting the meal that's best suited for you.
I really like his leashes. I'm a big fan of his leash pack. That's why I sort of convinced him to do it. But anyway, get your stuff from Einzelwiener.
Yep.
Do you know who has a fantastic website and ships internationally?
My wife?
Your wife,
Yeah.
Canine Pharmaceuticals.
I couldn't imagine her not having a good website, how much of a perfectionist she is.
Well, the products are amazing. My dog merely being alive is a walking testimonial to that. My dog, who I've retired numerous times and has come out of retirement when I've managed to get his body back to healthy. And a big part of that is related to Canine Pharmaceuticals. So check it out, everybody.
I could say so many nice and biased things about Canine Pharmaceuticals and my wife, but what I will say is ignore me. Just look at testimonials. The testimonials speak for themselves. That's where the field trials are working. What makes Narelle's day, and mine as well, is when people are emailing in and sending messages of, well, primarily people have had no hope in the past because just everything that they were trying wasn't working, and now it is. And that is the testament that something is actually really working. And the other thing which I will add, one of the things that Narelle's told me in the past is dogs are incapable of understanding the placebo effect.
Oh, that's a good point.
So you can fake it on a human, but you can't fake it on a dog.
I never thought about that before. That's actually a really good point.
Well, my wife's actually a very smart person.
There you go.
So she's told me that humans are subject to the placebo effect where dogs are not. So it either works or it doesn't on dogs.
There you go. That makes total sense.
Yep.
There's one other person who puts a fair amount of work into this show.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Funny about that.
And I have a digital product that you can buy. If you go to my website, seriousdogbusiness.com, right now I've got 2 courses available to you. The Overview, which is a small course where you could learn how I teach.
Yep.
But the other one is the Wave Tops, which is a bigger course. It's everything I know about dog training. Well, it's not everything. It's a lot of what I know about dog training.
Yeah,
Check it
terrific.
out.
Yeah.
$500 dues. That's all it's going to cost you.
I recommend it when people are saying, what do I do? How do I get in the industry? I recommend them to your course.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks,
Yeah.
sir. All right, on with the show. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart. I'm joined today. I was about to say in the studio. We're not in the studio.
We're not in the
I'm
studio.
joined today by my co-host, Glenn Cook.
Hello. Hello.
How are you, sir?
I'm good. What's news? Oh, it's my turn to turn a cog over you like you did to me a few episodes ago.
You did it. Hey, I got something I want to talk about today. I want to talk about evolution in the industry. And I want to be really upfront with this and say that I have had cause to reflect on myself significantly in the last week. You know, we've talked about it a bunch. I've spent the last couple of years sort of building out this online course. And I want to tell the story about that a little bit. And of course, you know, I'm talking about the course that I want people to buy, but it's been this huge part of my life for the last couple of years. And I want to sort of explain why. And it's given me cause to reflect on some things. And me and my close personal friend, ChatGPT, have had some pretty intense back and forths about that. So I thought we'd talk about that. What do you reckon?
Mate, I think it's a good topic to talk about because there's a lot of refinement that you go through over the years that you're doing things. Like you kind of learn a baseline of how to do things and then you believe that's the way. And you get stuck in a little bit of a headset of thinking, yeah, this is the way to do things. I've been mentored into this way of thinking and I've selected parts of it. And I really believe that this is the way, you know, like I've had some successes along the way. And then you'll have conversations with other people and you'll layer, it's like reskinning it. So you'll reskin it and you think, I've got some attributes that I want to add to my little program. This seems to make more sense now and it seems to be bearing better fruit. Like I can really start to see things evolving better. And then you'll start practicing a lot more. I think once you start really getting some hands-on with your own dogs, after you've got the confidence to have that baseline and build that foundation, you'll actually start playing with dogs. And then you'll realize, wow, this is interesting because this worked for some of the dogs that I've been working with, but there's a criteria that doesn't work and doesn't apply to some of these other dogs. And even though they have the potential to come through, and even though that I can see that there are similarities between these dogs, I have to do different things or I have to do modifications to bring out these behaviors in these other dogs. So you start becoming a little bit more bold in your experimentation and confident to do it because you've had the grounding and you've had the experience and you've had someone holding your hand for a period of time. I think the quote that we've touched on before that says, when the student is ready, the master coach will appear. But when the student is ready to take on, the coach will disappear, or words to the effect of. I know I've butchered that statement, but primarily what it means is when you need to be taught something, hopefully you'll find the right teacher. And the right teacher should lead you to have an understanding. They should give you a vision to sort of work with and not overload you with too much capacity in the beginning. And then as you start learning to take your steps through it, and it's the same that we do in dogs. We start off in a teaching learning phase, then we go into a training phase, and then we finally go into a proofing phase. But the dynamic, as I've said in a few episodes now, the dynamic between proofing and training is something that you'll shuttle backwards and forwards in for the rest of your life. When I've had conversations with people over those sort of concepts, people have kind of looked at me going, oh, no, I don't want to be involved in that. I want to work in the proofing phase of whatever I'm doing. But that's not the reality of things. And it's the investigatory stages that you actually go through with playing with dogs, with playing with systems and talking to people and attending seminars and looking at further learning capabilities. It doesn't mean that you don't know what you're doing. It just means that you've learned that there are attributes and bolt-ons that you can put towards your further knowledge. And therefore, you can have something it's not just something that you've just done a few little minor tweaks here and there. It's something that you've actually looked at with new sciences and with new understanding of it, where then you can break it down for your clients and your students or whoever that you're passing this information onto and saying, I've learned an absolute shitload out of what to do and more importantly, what not to do. And that's where I've said in the past where I've tried to encourage people is don't hide your mistakes from people because it's the mistakes that show people how to strengthen what they're doing. Like it's like that saying, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. That's a very important concept for people to grasp is that it's not the failure that fucks things for you. It's the failure that actually bolsters things for you because then you realize, this is not going to work on every dog that comes into my studio. This is not the way to do it on a broad scale. Like there are certain rules that I can apply here, but I'm really starting to think in a macro sense where I really need to get back into a micro sense sometimes and then go back out to a macro sense. And I can expand and contract that as I'm going through my training journey. Hopefully I've explained that in a way that's digestible when you're thinking about it, because for me, it's been something that I've struggled with earlier on because I really believed that I knew everything I needed to know. Like I had the baseline of everything that I could possibly know. And even though it was good grounding, it was good foundations, and I appreciate my mentors and the people that were training me, there's still dogs that it didn't line up with. There's still dogs that if you applied those principles, and then people might challenge you and say, well, maybe you weren't applying them correctly. Maybe you misheard what I'm saying. And I will say, and I will confess, maybe that's true. But it's the addition of learning new skills and new understandings. And sometimes it's just those little mistakes and those little experiences or those introductions which finally jog your memory to think, okay, I can try something else. I'm skilled enough to do it now. I said all that because you've developed a bunch of courses, you've got an online presence that people can sign into, and you've got this new one that you've just done now, which I think you should talk to people about and let them know about. But one of the things that I think that you've done, Pat, is that you've really walked the earth for a long period of time, thinking and contemplating on this at great depth on how to make this more understandable, like how to take a lot of the experiences and the stories that people were telling about training dogs and the behavioral inclusions that you have in it and make it more relatable. Because I think that's one of your greatest gifts. I think one of the things that you really do exceptionally well, you build things into a better story that people can go, oh, that really makes sense. Like the last dog trainer that I spoke to was regurgitating a lot of scientific jargon to me, and some of it made sense and some of it literally glanced straight off me. I felt that it was unrelatable or I didn't comprehend it, I guess. And I've spoken to people in the past where they've said, oh yeah, I've heard this before. And then I did a session with Pat and Pat explained it to me, but he broke it down in a digestible format, which really made sense to me and gave me the tools that I need to do that. So congratulations, mate. I think that, like I said, it's a real super strength that you have in telling good stories, but also backing it up with the institutional knowledge to support it as well.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I want to sort of take a step back and I want to sort of recap and relive it a little bit myself, like my own to's and fro's. I was going to say journey, but it's such a cliched word. The to's and fro's, my sways back and forth as a trainer. We've explained this throughout all of the episodes, but not since our first episodes where we were sort of interviewing each other and giving people a background have we sort of gone into this detail. So much has changed since then. It's been over 7 years. And so for me, I saw my first military working dog in 2005. And it was just an explosive detection dog. I'd never worked in close proximity with one before until then. And it was on a deployment. It was in Afghanistan in 2005. And it was like, I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I spoke to the handler and I didn't really know a lot about their employment stream and sort of found out quite a bit. But it was sort of peripheral. The two dogs that we had embedded with us, I can't even remember what, 101 was a border collie and I can't remember what the other one was. And they were just doing route clearance and, you know, checking people coming into the base and stuff like that. And so it was interesting to me, but it wasn't until 2008 that I had much more to do with a couple of dogs on a deployment. So it just kind of worked out that I ended up spending a lot of time with an American guy who had a dog. I was in a sort of very peculiar job that I was doing on a deployment and was moving around quite a lot and sort of was exposed to a lot of things outside of what my unit has. And at the time, we still had the SOA, which we talked about last week. We had their dogs embedded with us. And I had an incident where I got blown up. I hit an IED and it killed my interpreter. I was embedded with the Afghan army. It killed my interpreter and a bunch of the Afghan army guys. And the dog had gone over the IED. I can't remember exactly. I don't think that he'd been specifically told to clear the route. But anyway, we had two dogs embedded with us because it was the whole company, the whole platoon, both platoons, and we got blown up. Knowing what I know now, it's probably unreasonable to think that that dog would have found that because it wasn't a specific route clearance. There's a lot of details to it. But it was interesting to me because I was like, okay, there's some big consequences to these dogs not finding things that they should. And I'm carrying out the body of the consequence, right? So I was like, okay, this is fucking for realsy. And then through another incident that I had on that trip, I got to work with, as I was saying, an American guy who had a biting dog and got to see my first ever live bite of a real, you know, for realsies proper bite. And it sort of flicked this switch in me where I was like, oh, wow, this is the whole thing. And I had never kind of thought about the idea of the picture of sort of hunting for a person with a dog. That was such a weird thing that I had never considered. It was just not something part of dog training that I'd considered. So I was really kind of enamored by it. And when I got back to Australia, I sort of obsessively wanted to learn to train dogs. But at my unit, there were no dogs at the time. In 2008, there was no dogs at 2 Commando. And so it was at that time, it was never on the cards that I could become a military working dog handler. Like there was no path for that for me because I was in a completely different stream. And like I probably could have stopped being a commando and become a detection dog handler or something like that, but I wasn't about to do that. So I just personally got really obsessed with it. I had no one to talk to about it. I didn't know any dog handlers. I didn't have any pathway into it. I wasn't a part of any of the dog community or anything. So I just started obsessively researching dog training in the only way that you can in 2008, which is like very early YouTube videos at that point, because YouTube was fairly new. So there were only certain people who were early adopters of that, and books. And overwhelmingly, I found myself sort of becoming something of a force-free trainer because I got somewhat indoctrinated by the messaging that was available to me in the force-free. If you have no dog to practice on, which I didn't, because we had a dog, me and my now wife, she wasn't my wife at the time, but she had a dog, Ernie. We got him together, but he was her dog because I used to travel so much. And Ernie and I were never especially good friends. He never really liked me because this time in my life, I used to travel so much that I was not home a lot. So Ernie kind of saw me as like the dude that comes and sleeps with his girlfriend while every now and again, because like he was convinced that he was Jane's dog and I was just some random guy that would come and go. So anyway, like I didn't, and he was so old, he couldn't really be trained. He was like 15 by the time I really got into it. So I was just a theorist and I was in all the forums that were available at the time, which weren't many. And I'm reading the books and I'm trying to watch the YouTube videos.
You just mentioned books a couple of times. Tell me the first book that you read that resonated with you that you thought, holy shit, this is something.
It wasn't an early book that I read at all. I don't think I read this book until maybe 2013 or might have been, maybe 2013 was Dick Stall's book on how to raise a puppy. I'd read a bunch of other stuff and watched all the videos and stuff, but Dick Stall's book on how to raise a puppy, it's a short read. You probably knock through it in 3 or 4 hours.
Is that where he's wearing double denim?
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like a serial killer on the cover. And like clearly it's full of spelling mistakes as well. And it's written in kind of broken English. Like he must have just been like, no, that's the translation from Dutch. That's how it's going to be. And I don't want to hear you editors telling me it's going to be different from that. But it's excellent. It's excellent. And it's so basic. That's kind of going to be the theme of everything that I talk about in my journey to becoming a dog trainer, is that all the people who I've learned the most from, and I find myself referring back to the most, and are the people who definitely I attribute the most of what I know to. What I actually learned from them was the basics. And getting really good at the basics, like really understanding the foundation stuff. And I talk about this all the time. This is something that was drilled into me in the army, and I constantly try and drill into other people now. My kids, the people I train with, everybody, is that excellence is mastering the basics. It is getting to the point where the easy stuff is on autopilot so that it's no longer easy. It is just happening in the background and you don't have to assign any gray matter to it. And that allows you to free up all the gray matter to work on the complicated stuff.
Vince Lombardi, I think that's how his last name is pronounced. He was credited with that statement when he transformed the Green Bay Packers, the American football team, the amount of championships he led them through by taking them back. And he said, this is something you just can't escape. Like, we have to go back to the basics. It's one of those things that even through the last couple of episodes that we've done, you and I have made a revisit to those little things that are important. And I just think that people trying to escape that is a fool's errand. Like anyone who's just telling you, just glance through this stuff and you get to the real fun stuff at the end, they've really shone a light on their ignorance of what they actually know about life in general. Because everything that I've done, every mistake that I've made, if I've retraced my way back to the beginning or I've read the instructions properly, then I finally find, this is the missing part. That's the screw that I was missing in this little IKEA thing that I was supposed to get together. If only I read the instructions instead of assuming that I could just bolt through to the end of it, it shows you how to do it. Like, it spells it out for you turn the piece of wood this way, not the other way. Then you don't have to unravel the entire history of everything that you've just done to get back to this basic part. Just do it easy. Just follow the instructions the way that they're listed out for you.
On that, I know I've said this on the podcast as well before, but I joined the Army under, I'm not sure what they call it anymore, but it was at the time, I was on the pilot program for it. It was called the Direct Recruiting to Special Forces. So all going to plan, which it did for me. There were, I think, 48 of us started, and we went to basic training, then the School of Infantry. Then we did this advanced infantry course, and then we went straight on to selection. And we were the first people to do that. You know, they had to raise another company. I guess they knew what was coming. So they had to get more guys into special forces, and they figured like our recruiting from within the Army is not enough. We have to recruit from elsewhere. So I was one of those. And so of the 48 guys I started with, I think 3 of us finished on the projected timeline and became commandos without missing a beat. We went all the way through. So it was never the plan that I was ever going to be in the regular Army. And now what happens is if they don't pass, they get sort of shafted to the regular Army. The way that it started with me was we were reservists so that they could kick us out. So if I had failed at anywhere along the way, those guys got the option of like, you can go anywhere else in the regular Army or you can just fuck off because the program was new. So to me, I was going to fuck off. It was like, if I don't make it in here, I'm out of here because this is what I've decided to do. And I had it in my mind of what being a commando was, right? Because you don't know until you're behind the curtain. You don't know what's actually behind there. So I had this idea of what it was. And so I sort of, when I was doing all the basic infantry training that I was doing, you know, like the basic combat stuff, I was like, okay, I just have to get through this until I can appease all these dickheads, and then I'm going to go do cool guy stuff, right? I just got to get through all this. And so basic stuff, like one of the things you learn at School of Infantry is like all arms call for fire, which is like how you would call in air support no matter what kind it is. It's like the most basic version of calling in air support and how to bracket onto a target. And it works with mortars and artillery and aircraft and all kinds of stuff. It's this really basic thing that everybody's meant to know. And you think of it like, when you're learning it, you're like, oh, this seems like so stupid. And you've got a little cheat sheet that you look at and you sort of have to call it in and stuff. And then what I didn't realize, I was like, this seems like it's so stupid and basic, but I've got my cheat sheet. Why are we practicing this? And it's like, well, because mate, when you actually do this, you're going to be stressed out of your fucking mind. If you're actually having to use your all arms call for fire, you are under attack. Right? Like, so, and this is like what you use when you're calling in fire from someone. You're just begging for help at this point, right? So yeah, you really, really have to know this shit inside out, back to front, and upside down, because that little cheat sheet you've got, you ain't pulling that out at the time, mate. Like, unless you've got that tattooed on your forearm, you're not going to have time to read that shit. You need to know that inside out, back to front, and upside down, because when you have to use that is going to be the most stressful experience of your fucking life when you have to do that. To me, I was like, I just have to get through all this infantry shit. And then when I passed selection and, you know, did my commando training, and you actually get put into the team. So like now I've been in the Army, 2 years or whatever before you actually finish all your training, you get put into the teams. I was horrified. Like I was like, okay, cool. Now I get issued my laser beam and my jetpack, and like I get to do cool fucking special forces shit that no one knows about. And I was horrified to find out it's just more of the same shit, right? And one of the examples I use, because this is where it sort of, I can remember, it was such an important thing to me. I can remember solidifying this, was doing an obstacle crossing, which is like where as a team of people, if you're on patrol, you get to a place where you're like, this is sketchy. There's a very specific way we're going to cross this because it could be an ambush or something like that, right? Like this is a bottleneck or a funnel and we have to go through it. And there's a real specific way of doing it. We would back to practicing that. And I was like, I've been doing this for fucking ages. Like I know how to do this, but ad nauseum, because what I realized is by the time you get to do the obstacle crossing for realsy, like on a deployment or whatever, it's just a way of getting across an obstacle, but you have a million other things going on in your mind at that time. So you cannot be thinking about doing that whilst you're doing that. You have to get so good at doing that so that if while you're doing that, your SATCOM radio breaks down and you have to now figure out how the fuck to communicate via a satellite and remember the exact, like there's a lot of difficult shit involved in doing that. You have to remember how to do that whilst you're on autopilot doing the actual dangerous thing that you're doing. So that to me just really drilled into me that you've got to get really good at the basics. You have to get so good at the basics that you never have to think about those. And so that to me was my early grounding in training, in how to be trained and how to train others. Is excellence is mastery of the basics. And I just, have carried that all the way through. So anyway, back to sort of, I became quite force-free and I joined the local dog club, which is like as force-free as it gets. And I was like, yeah, I'm force-free trainer with no dog. I had no dog. So like I'm telling people, and because people know I'm getting into dog training, I'm talking to people about it all the time, I'm throwing out advice I've got no idea about. I'm just regurgitating the shit that I've seen YouTube videos of and I've read in books. And I've never done any of this shit. I've heard that it works. I've seen edited videos where people tell you that it works, but I have no fucking idea. And I'm even telling people who I'm at their homes and I'm watching them effectively train their dog. I'm like, oh, you're a piece of shit. You're doing that all wrong. I got all this book knowledge about that and you don't know shit. So eventually Ernie dies and it's time to get a dog, right? And so I get this dog. It's a fucking disaster. And it turns out like I'm full of shit. I don't know anything. I don't know. Like what I did know was like I could train that dog to a really high standard. He could do some really cool stuff. And if I'm honest, like the obedience that dog had, it's probably the best obedience I've ever had on any dog because I was new and I cared about it. But I couldn't control him. Like he was full dangerous.
I met him. I know that dog well.
But at the back end of his life, you met him. And like, mate, he was so dangerous. He was like, and nervy and he was a disaster.
That was his issue. He just couldn't overcome his nerves.
He was very forward aggressive, but also very nervy. So he was like what I know of a dog now, like I didn't understand all this when I got him, but he was the exact kind of dog that actually is very dangerous because he would tag you a couple of times and then freak out and jump off and then tag you a bunch more times. His nerves would like cycle because he would be afraid and it would be enough for him to go forward and he would just bang, bang, like almost like a Kelpie.
What was his name again?
Now you a couple of times. Ryder.
Ryder, that's it. Yes, Ryder. Interesting fun fact is Ryder is actually the dog in our logo. It's Biff and Ryder.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. And now the Canine Paradigm one. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Because he was my first dog. Yeah. So that was
it's
when
Biff, my old Roddy, and Ryder.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it was modeled off those two dogs. No, it wasn't, but it was just, they were sort of like the models of the dogs that we had because you had Ryder at the time we started and I had Biff.
Yeah, so it was like generic Malinois and generic Rottweiler.
Yes.
But yeah, anyway, so like that for me was then I was like, oh, right, okay, like practical is different from theory. Dog training, right? And I was like, oh, okay, like I'm full of shit. All this stuff that I've been saying, it doesn't work, right? It's not that it doesn't work. It's that there's a lot of missing information here. Like I still think this, and this was my intro to becoming a balanced trainer, is that when you're just looking at the data, right? Like you're just looking at books people have written or blog posts or videos people have made. And there's one group of people that says, you can train a dog to a really high standard without ever having to use any sort of pain compliance. You never need to use any tools. You never need to use, the terms I always say is like fear and intimidation in training. Then you can achieve a really high standard. And so like, okay, there's one group of people saying that. And then there's another group of people who are saying, nah, that's not true. Like there are times where you need to create aversions. There are times where you have to compel a dog to do things that it wouldn't choose to do by itself, no matter how much positive reinforcement you're telling it is on offer for doing it. And the truth is, when you get to the core of it, at the end of the day, nobody likes to say these words, but negative reinforcement and often positive punishment, they're actually pain compliance, right? Like that's when you want to use the dirtiest word available. That's what it is. It's pain compliance. So you've got one group of people saying like, no, you don't ever have to use any of that. You can achieve a really high standard. And then there's another group of people saying, no, you do, right? But if there's no demos, because these are books you're reading, right? And they're just talking head YouTube videos or whatever, and these are blog posts. And we know now, like with social media, it's bad enough. But you remember back in the forum days, holy shit, the nonsense people used to say about things they had no idea what they were talking about. Well, I was one of them. Right? And so I still think that if you have no practical application, there's two groups of people. One are really force free and the others are saying, no, it's not true. If you go like, no, I want to be in the group that want to use pain compliance, you're probably an asshole when you've got no idea of like what actually works. So that's why I was like, well, I'm not going to do any of that if I don't need to. But then you realize like, oh, this has a ceiling like this. And these guys are not assholes. They're telling the truth. Like this is just reality. So to me, that was my first branch plan where I just was like, oh, it's so much different to what I thought, right? Like my theoretical application here just isn't what I have come to think that it is. Like practicality is so different. And then that dog was really dangerous. And like he was dangerous his whole life, but I could control him once I started using balanced techniques. I could take him places. His world got huge compared to what it was because, when I was just using positive reinforcement with him and I was like, I was a strict plus R trainer with him. He was dangerous and he had a very small world because I couldn't, how could I control this dangerous dog? And he was dangerous in the true sense of it because like he was nervy. My dog now will bite whoever I tell him to bite, but I don't tell him to bite anyone. So he's not at all dangerous, even though he's got way more power. He's way more capable. He's a dog that can really fight the man and is happy to do it. He doesn't because that's not a compulsion that he has. He's like, oh, righto, like if that's the thing we're doing, I'll do that. But the rest of the time, no way. But my first dog wasn't that. He was dangerous because he was nervy and he was afraid of everybody, probably because of like not great genetics, but also, not great upbringing either. He was 14 months or so when I got him. So he was dangerous. He would bite people for real, not like a proper sustained bite and not fight the man. But he would tag people and then flee and then freak out that he fled and he'd get stuck in a circle and run in and try and tag him again. Like he was dangerous to be around.
That level of unpredictability in anything, like in people, in dogs, in animals in general, just in any species that you're introduced to, that level of cyclical fear and then the retaliation that they believe they need to do, that is a scary thing to be involved in, especially if you're in an environment where you're exposed to it and there's not much you can do about it. It can happen in kennel environments too. And this is why we have been very selective on the type of dogs that we introduce there because we've got young, capable, I will say, but mainly young, capable women staff that are involved in the care and maintenance and upbringing of these animals. So in the beginning, we had some of these dogs in and it would result in workplace issues, work cover and investigations that would have to happen. So we put our foot down and we said, all right, well, there's a criteria of dogs that can come in. There's a criteria of dogs that come to daycare now because this is not an acceptable exposure that we want our staff to have the duress to come to work under.
Yeah.
And it takes time for these things to happen. Unfortunately, it's like the old saying, it's not with malice or intent, but it's like the old saying that in order to create an omelette, you have to break some eggs sometimes. And the unfortunate thing is you only learn by the issues that happen over time. But through that assessment criteria, all of the group got together and said, all right, let's do things better. These dogs can only be trainer escorted. It's not that we're not giving them a path. It's that the trainers need to work with these dogs. They're a trainer-only dog. Yeah. The trainers need to feed them. The trainers need to care for them. The trainers need to even assess their own safety with these type of dogs. The issue, nonetheless, as you were pointing out in your dog, is that you can never really trust those dogs ever again. They default to a hair trigger when life gets too intense for them. So you can layer some things over top and like you can pretty some things up and you can add some obedience and you can definitely make their life better and make things more sustainable ongoing. But the issue is how recallable the defense attributes are in a species when they have a foundation of it. And that's the thing that people have to understand is when we're working with predatory behaviors, even though that's instinctive, in some dogs it's very intense and in other dogs it's not so intense. The domestication or, breeding practices, there's multiple different levels of that. The issue with a defensive dog is defense is always recallable and it will come back at a time where it's not as predictable as you think it was. And sometimes you don't understand the triggers that's going through the dog's head because you don't understand what's actually transpiring inside the brain until the behavior manifests.
Yeah.
It's like where I say to people, what am I thinking? Pick a number from 1 to 10. What am I thinking? Majority of times, unless you're like a mentalist and you've been involved in that deep level of training where you can see tells and there's still behaviors that you can trick people into or you can manifest in people to actually expose it. It's hidden from you until the behavior happens. And then the behavior happens and people go, oh, I never saw that coming. Where did that come from? And it takes time again, and it takes experience for a person to be able to, because good dog trainers are like good mentalists, like they're people who study behavior intrinsically, like they actually make it their life's work to look at what a dog is doing. So when they do go into any environment, they can say, oh, this dog is about to do this, or does this dog have a history of this, because I can see this undercurrent of behavior or this manifestation of something that isn't normal in most dogs that I see. Because you have that experience, you can offer that advice. But without having that experience, you'll miss it. And you'll miss it by big volumes because you're not really trained in it.
Exactly.
Have you read the book, The 5 Rings by Masashi? Have you ever read his book? I read it a long time ago, and I was actually reminded of it the other day when I was listening to a podcast with Joe Rogan and Bono, and they were talking about the 5 rings, and Rogan was rehashing like how Masashi was one of the most celebrated master samurais in the world, like a swordsmith, but in calligraphy and poetry and everything that he did, because he basically said in life, and the reason I'm bringing this up before is because your discussion and your apprenticeship through the dog training industry, when you were balanced between a force-free trainer and a balanced trainer. But Masashi often talks about it in his book, but just his life practices, how you have to have balance in everything that you're doing, and how, like those foundational micro skills build you to becoming a macro expert, but you must be balanced in everything that you're doing. It's an interesting thing. You can't escape this when you're looking at mastery of any practice. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. Every master that's done this, doesn't matter the gender, doesn't matter the age group. It talks about the master, the person who has got quite along the road of their journey. They always reflect when they have become wise, when they're finally inspired by wisdom. They finally come back to their students, their pupils, the people that they're teaching or mentoring, whatever it might be, and they tell them the same thing. You must be balanced in your approach, and you must focus on the basics. It's the only way to do this. It's a daily practice. It's a grind. And unfortunately, you and I were talking about this earlier on with some experiences in your dog training frustrations and so forth. It's one of those things that you'll only get out of a small group of people. And that's why, you often see martial arts groups, there's only a very small amount of people who finally get to black belt because there's such a learning curve to really getting it. Even, for example, when you get to that black belt group, there'll be a percentage of those people who are actually really good at it, because some people will get there, but they got there to get the belt, where other people got there because they live the life. They understand, like, this is important to me. I didn't get here just to wear the belt. I got here to be, like the best at this craft.
Yeah, the belt was a consequence of me.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It just got that. It wasn't that was what I was going for. So to me, when I decided, okay, well, I'm a balanced trainer now, the big thing for me was that opened up my dog's world. That's why I was like, oh, this is totally different, because my dog was highly trained but had a very small world. And now I've got this very highly trained dog in a much bigger world, because I can take him places. I can tell him to knock it off. And he was always nervy, and it was always a management case. It wasn't like I would love to have that dog again just because I love the dog, but I would, with the skill set that I have now, I'd like to see how I'd go again. But I think that of every dog. I look at Remy every day and I think, God, man, I would fucking kill to start over with you, But I think that will be the case with every dog you ever own.
You always think that. I mean, I thought that with Randy. I often look back and think, if only I invested more time into him, and if only we were doing PSA earlier. And like, there were so many things at the end of his life that I reflected on that. But you do that with everything. Even with Harley. Harley was a magnificent dog. I really wish that PSA existed and Harley was around, because Harley would have loved PSA. He would have thrived in it. It was almost a sport that was built for him. He just loved that, because that was all Harley's life. It was just scenario setting up. Like, we do crazy things and just jump out of bushes and, like have people running out from all directions. For me, like I've said, I've reminisced on this before, it was such an exciting time because we didn't have all the pressures that dog trainers have now. We didn't have all these unrealistic expectations. You just did the work. You just had fun. You just had fellowship. Like, not everybody fucking was out to fucking bring everybody down and trying to tear everyone apart. Like, people fucking came together and loved on each other and, you know, like we're sharing, and you still had problems. It's not like it was just this euphoric nirvana, but it was just a fun fucking time to be around because you're just immersed in doing the work and doing all those things. But as you said before, you know, like reflecting on Ryder and even Remy and dogs that you'll have in the future, you always get to the end and you always think, if only. But the main thing to do, mate, is enjoy the journey that you had and reflect on what they taught you. You know, like think on.
Oh, well, that's the thing. So that's the thing. I learned so much.
I just want to add to this too with Ryder. Could you have trusted him with your kids the way that you can trust Remy? I remember you and I having a discussion on that early in the part is having a dog like Ryder with little children around. He might have been fine for the majority of times, but it might have been something just got in his head and suddenly he becomes a risk to young children. You know, and they're things that they're responsibilities that I've had discussions with parents all through my training career. You know, like I've gone and seen, I would say now hundreds of dogs where I've gone into homes and I've said, yeah, you're right. I know this dog at one stage was your life and your baby, but you didn't have the responsibilities of young children. And if you're going to have this dog, there has to be a clear divide between the children and this dog. This dog cannot be an inside dog around children because it won't accept it the same way that you want it to do. Even though you have all these wishes and big, strong feelings, this dog doesn't understand that anymore. Like it was managed by you. So you have to make some serious and some strong decisions around that. And that fucking sucks. Like it sucks for the family and it sucks for like a trainer giving that advice out because you kind of feel that you're eliminating something by quitting. But you also have to be a futurist. You have to look to the future and really recall on your experiences to look to that future importantly and responsibly to say, this is going to end badly if you don't heed my advice based on my breadth of experience.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I think I became this trainer. I had this real grounding in force free. Then I was a trainer who could tell a dog to knock stuff off. I was like, hey, quit it. Right. And I did that with this dog. And then like things got more interesting for me when I started working with people. So like I'd only trained at like the local dog club here, which, you know, was pretty basic. It's almost like a community service thing that they do where it's like, you know, you take your dog down. But it was interesting to me and I think I learned a fair bit there. And then it was when I first started then training. So my first sort of real mentor and business partner, Sam, got brought into our unit to raise the dog capability. And I was, you know, peripherally involved in that initially. That's when the turbo got attached. That's when I saw like what was actually capable. And we brought in a batch, you know, Sam brought in the first batch of military working dogs that we got, and getting to play with them and experience them and see like the other side of like, oh, right. Cause these are untrained dogs. And my experience with military working dogs at that point were with trained ones, exceptionally trained ones and incredible handlers. And so now I got to see like, oh, these are raw, right? Like these have to be shaped and molded. They don't just come out of the box like this, because my experience, what I'd seen other people was they just do what they're told, right? And the guy that I saw, the guy that was my intro to this, was an incredible dog and an incredible handler. So it was just this effortless, easy thing. And that's when I found out, I was like, oh, wait, no, you got to train them. Like you got to teach them this stuff. And then I got really lucky, you know, like life turned out really well for me in that I got sent overseas. I got sent to the US to do some stuff for work for when I was in the army, and was able to sort of convince them into allowing me to then go to Michael Ellis' school for a bit. So I did some time there. And, you know, like along the way, once I decided I was into the balanced training, I bought all of the Michael Ellis DVDs, right? Like I bought them all. And when Learberg started streaming, remember those days? Like that was like, oh my God, I don't have to order it anymore. I can watch it now. Are you fucking kidding me? And streaming was like, wow. So I bought all of that shit and became pretty handy, but really was still what I would later find out was much of a popo-nay trainer, because I had this such strong foundation in positive reinforcement. And of course I'd be like, you know, no, I'm a balance trainer now. I'll tell a dog to stop stuff. I'll tell a dog to knock it off. But what I hadn't figured out was negative reinforcement. And that's when I went looking myself. I didn't like what I saw because I was looking at, you know, pretty old school sort of gun dog stuff. That was all that was available, you know, because this was still the DVD days, right? So like I'd bought some DVDs that I'd sort of partway through was like, okay, I can see that this works, but this is definitely not something I'm going to do. Like there's no way I'm doing this to a dog. I'm not putting a fucking toe hitch on a dog to teach it to force fetch. Let me tell you that, right? And so I was like, I see it. I can see that it works. And it like this dog's fine because it's an off tap high drive lab that recovers instantly, but this is not for me. And it wasn't until I met Bart and started working with Bart that I really began to understand, oh, right, negative reinforcement isn't that. It can be that, for sure, it can be, but it can be lots of other things and can be used really differently. And that's when I think I really became a balance trainer with true balance, right? Like I really was then like, oh, right, like I know all how to use all this stuff. I don't have a bias against wanting to use one or the other beyond success, and success is measured by the experience of the dog and the outcomes that we achieve, right? So that really changed things for me, and really getting deep into the NEPO system and understanding that. And I got really lucky. Getting an opportunity to train with you was a huge thing for me, Glenn. Like with all your experience and what I was learning, with Bart and with you, and then putting into practice in front of you and getting feedback about like, I see where you're going with this, but it's not working. Like I think those are the sort of feedback that you need to grow. And we certainly have seen it with some people in the NEPO community because Bart encourages so much like creativity and changing, try it out, see how you go. You see a lot of people doing dumb shit that just is like, why the fuck are you doing that? Like you're trying to reinvent the wheel. The wheel works great. Don't reinvent it. So it's easy to fall into that trap unless you've got someone like you that I'm training with and go like, what are you doing that for? Like this is a more complicated, more difficult way of doing the thing that you were doing quite well yesterday.
I want to add a compliment to you just in that line of discussion. Through my life, I've met a lot of people who have talent and they're skilled and they pick things up really well. One of the things that I think separated you from a lot of other people that I've worked with in the past and given feedback to is you thrive on feedback and take it very well.
Oh, yeah.
Without becoming defensive about it and then it becoming an issue between us. Like it's one of the things that I've really appreciated about you in general. Like it's almost that you beg for the feedback. Like, what am I doing? Then you go away and think about it, but in a very constructive way where you come back, you've deliberated on it and go, all right, well, like I've looked at this from a couple of different angles and here is what I think the solution is. Like that's a skill set in itself, mate. And that's why I wanted to pay a compliment to you. And it's not just a circle jerk between old mates. It's something that it's cost me friendships before because one thing I found about people is people say that they abhor dishonesty, but one of the things that I've found is people really don't like the truth either. That's cost me a lot of friendships when I've told people the truth. Like people have said, I wish people were honest with me. I wish people would tell me the truth. And when you do, sometimes you'll find that that's the end of a friendship. And it may have not been a friendship in the start, but I have lost people in my life that I thought were important to me over telling them the truth before about giving them the feedback that they said they wanted. Whereas when I have with you and I've told you things or I've passed things on to you where I've thought, I really don't know whether I should have said that or not, you've never come back and been an ass about it. You've always come back and thought on different dimensions about it. So it's a long-winded way of saying thank you for being a mature person and handling feedback well, because I think everybody that you've worked with, Bart, me, Sam, along your life, like things that you've done with people and a lot of people that I've heard, Jerry and a whole host of people, you've taken their feedback exceptionally well. And that's why I'm saying where I led with this at the start, like you've crafted it into something digestible where you've developed it into a better way of thinking and a better way of communicating with people. Because sometimes when you're honest with people, as I said before, maybe your honesty is abrasive, where you've taken it and thought, well, if I was to teach this back to somebody and they didn't like hearing it the way I heard it, how could I explain it to them where it wouldn't raise a defensive outcome? It would actually raise curiosity. Because I really think that in itself of teaching and working with people that's really what you should aim to inspire is curiosity and not fear and opposition or jealousy. You shouldn't be raising some of these things. It should be, that's interesting. That makes me curious. That makes me want to learn more about this subject matter or more about this dog's behavior or even more about the client that I'm working with rather than just hating on them and getting frustrated with them and becoming the trainer you weren't intended to be.
Thank you, sir. A critical point in my life was I used to host the NEPO schools in Australia. So I'd facilitate them. I'd organize the training place and the students and stuff, and then Bart would come over and teach them. And we did a lot of them and I was at them all. So like I was really learning the system and I was training a lot of dogs. I was doing tons and tons of in-home behavior mod at this time, as well as getting to scratch away at like PSA type dogs. And it was when we were doing this was when we were just sort of starting to get PSA going, right? Like when I first started training with Bart, we didn't have PSA and I didn't have Remy, but it was sort of beginning to build up. But one of the things I got really lucky about was we were teaching, there was a silver school and it was for the army. So there were only army guys there and it was mostly my old unit. And Bart got really sick. He had a fever. He was really, really sick. Sort of mid-sentence, he stopped speaking English and started speaking Flemish because he was like, he had a fever, was kind of delirious. And I had to go over, I was like, hey, Bart, you're not speaking English. And he was in bad shape. Like he had a real bad fever. And, you know, they paid a lot of money for this. So he's delivering it. You know, that's classic Bart. He's just like, the show must go on, right? Like he's doing it no matter what. And I was like, shit, like I'll try and take over for the day. So I kind of finished up that day. And then the next day he was fairly better, but he was like, you know, you continue going. So long story short, what ended up happening was I ended up teaching most of a silver school and you couldn't ask for a better situation. I got really lucky because it was a permissive environment. They were friends of mine. They were army guys. They were guys that I was in the army with mostly. I'm teaching it to them. You know, they know me and they're supportive of me. And I'm teaching it with Bart watching. And so he had me teach the rest of the school. And as I was teaching it, it felt to me like I kind of knew the system. I felt like I understood it. And I'd already taught it to a lot of people sort of individually and, you know, clients. I'm teaching bits and pieces of the method. I'm using it myself. But as I was explaining out the whole method to these guys, I felt to me like the Tetris pieces that were all floating around all suddenly just like locked into place. And I was like, oh, as I was saying it, it was just like, I get it. I fully get it. Like I totally understand this. And so at the end of that week, Bart said to me, he goes, you have to start teaching the seminars. Like this is, you're ready. Like you're ready to do it. So that's when I started teaching the Nipopo seminars. And I traveled around. I got really lucky again. You know, traveled around Australia and the US teaching that and got invited lots of different places to do it. And I was, you know, super fortunate to have that opportunity. But what I found was I learned so much from Bart, but I was trying to emulate him as a trainer. And at a certain point, I realized like, no, what I need to do is use this system that I've learned, but apply it the way that I want to apply it, right? Like it's time to evolve, not out of it or past it, because I wouldn't presume to say that there's a better way, but there's a way that fit me. And so that's when I then sort of was like, okay, I'm going to stop saying that I'm doing Nipopo. It's not like me and Bart had a breakup. I love him. I'll always respect and support him. But it was like, okay, it's time for me to start doing this in the way that I think I'm going to. And then I sort of started like, I felt like, you know, I don't want to say that I mastered it, but I really, really, really understood it. I was like, okay, now that I understand that, now I need to start looking for where are the gaps and what else can I bolt onto this? Because this is going to be my foundation. Like I've got a really strong, this is my formal education because everything else was sort of haphazard, you know, here and there. And I spent so long training with him and with you that then I was like, okay, now I feel like I have a solid foundation. It's time to start making this my own, like create a bit of flair, like build the house and put in the decorations the way that I like them, not the way that other people have told me to like them. And in broadening my horizons and looking elsewhere, one of the biggest things, and it really was interesting to me, and this is one of the reasons why this is so on my mind, was I did a private lesson with someone the other day on Zoom one, and he talked about how he was listening to old episodes of the podcast, and he's like, oh, you know, you're not really a play-based trainer. I was like, oh, you know what? I used to say that I wasn't, but it's because I didn't understand what a play-based trainer was. I was like, I absolutely am. Like, how the fuck else? How are you not? Like, I don't really understand how anybody that can train, if you're playing tug and using that as your reinforcer and flowing that into behaviors, that's what that is. So I was like, oh, I've never not been that. I just sort of misunderstood what people thought these games were and how they go.
A lot of times with that, these are just marketing play words too. Like this is, you know, there's a lot of things that you quoted this a while ago. You said, what's old is new again. There's tons of stuff. And I wish that I had the video archives to be able to show it of old things that we used to do. You know, it may not have had the beautiful polish that you see around today, but there's a lot of techniques and a lot of things that we were doing, you know, which was play-based behavior and so forth. So when I see people doing it and talking about it in contrast to like, oh, no, I'm doing this really cool thing that you wouldn't understand, I'm thinking, dude, we're doing that 30 years ago. You know, it's just,
and there's people who are better at it,
and there's people who are better at it, and which was what I was about to say. The other thing I wanted to lead back to before is when you were talking about your evolution and coming to understand this. I remember distinctly when you and I were in my kitchen and I was talking to you about the evolution of becoming your own man. Because a similar thing happened to me and I'm not saying this to discredit Boyd because I love Boyd too. And Boyd's been like a friend of mine since I was a kid. I was training martial arts with Boyd when I was 15, 16 years old. I've known him that long. People started to think of me as Boyd's boy. That's the connotation that they had. They'd say things like that to me. And I never saw it as an insult. I kind of saw it as a badge of honor. But then I also thought, well, how do I actually become recognized as me? Like how would people know that I can do this and I'm capable of doing other things as well? And that's why it led me into exploring Schutzen and meeting Alec Jones and all these other people is because, and Boyd encouraged that. Like he never said to me, don't do this, only train the way that I do. And that's why I'm saying I'm crediting him with that exploratory presence because he used to always say to me, mate, go out and learn things and bring them back to the club. Find out what other people are doing, like learn from great people. He brought Stuart Hilliard back. He brought like Ed Frawley back. He brought Michael Ellis. He introduced these people who were revolutionary in their work at that time. And we always used to think, I'm not going to make this a religious thing, but it was kind of like, what Jesus says to the disciples is go out and become fishers, like go out, fishers of men, like go out and bring knowledge back and let's share it readily with people. Once again, if, like reflecting on the mastery of people and how they become wise and how they start learning how to become like a really good teacher of people is they say, let's share knowledge. This is not something that's proprietary and something that we just coddle into ourselves. Like some of the worst people that I've ever worked with in my life, it's not dog training related. It's just it's a people thing, is jealous, small-minded people who I was one of, have experience in this. And I can talk of it freely because I know what that's like to become jealous and small-minded when you think you have to protect things from
famine mindset.
It's a famine mindset. And it really isn't the wrong way to do it. It doesn't mean that you need to just give everything to everybody because sometimes you can give the wrong information to the wrong person. Yeah. Wisdom is all about how to actually do that and who deserves to have it sometimes because you could relate that to the development of nuclear arsenals or nuclear power or something like that. Some people will use it for the good of humanity where other people will use it for the destruction of humanity. So, yeah.
One of the things, in line with what you're saying, one of the things that Bart always said to me was, we used to talk a lot about dog training and then our conversations turned into people training when I was teaching seminars and he'd coach me through that. And one of the things he always drilled into me and I, very much paid off was said, people are going to get you around to teach them Nipopo because they want to learn it, right? But if they're professionals and they're doing things, if they're into it enough that they're paying for you to come out and learn from you, they're good at stuff. So when you're there, like learn from them. And that's where, like for me, when I started traveling, even though I was traveling mostly as a teacher, that's where my capability and skill set just went through the roof because you're now exposed to all these different people across all these different disciplines that do so many different things. And they're like, hey, we're aware of this system and we want you to teach us what it is and then help us figure out how to apply it into our specialty if we choose to do that. And I got to do that so many different places. I was so lucky the amount of people that then I was like, okay, well, show me what you do and how you do it. And there were tons of people I was like, wow, you guys are incredible trainers. Like, you're way better than me. Like, I'm here, I'm going to teach you Nipopo. Yeah, I'm going to explain the system to you. But for sure, I want to learn everything I can from you guys while you're here. And so to me, that's when things got really crazy. Like when I started immersing myself in other places and being a part of the PSA community meant that I would go, whenever I was traveling, if I was in the US teaching, I would make sure that I butted it up against some kind of event that I could go to. I could go to a trial. I could find out who was the club in that area. I could go train with those people. And I'm very lucky that people have always welcomed me and given me those opportunities. The way it's gone for me is that I have changed styles as a trainer so many times. And I love to experiment with doing different things and feeling out different dogs and like, what's the mask that this dog needs to see me wearing in order to be successful? And then that's a different mask to what this dog needs to see me wearing in order to be successful and kind of figuring that out and learning how do dogs think and feel and how do we apply all that? And then circling back to what we talked about earlier, the foundation for me along the way has always been, how do I simplify this, right? Like, how do I turn this into, like, how do I strip all of this stuff back to very first principles to be in a way where I can remember this, apply it, and act on autopilot, right? Like, because I'm now teaching people, I need my brain actually very often when I'm working a dog has to be with the crowd explaining what my body is doing. So I was like, okay, I need to get on autopilot. I need to get so good at this that I can do this kind of shit whilst I'm talking and explaining what I'm doing, so that all of my gray matter, my thought process is to the instruction of what I'm doing. But what I'm doing, I need to be so good at this that it just happens in the background without me having to think too much. All of that came together to me to get to the point where I was like, it's time to build a real course. Like, it's time to put together everything that I know. And that's what I ended up calling it. I've got this course that's ready. We put out the wave tops part, which was, to keep the lights on. It was the first part of the course that was essentially the seminar that I used to teach. And it's 6 hours of me just telling stories. And what I've decided in the way that it goes, like, it's all gone into one big package now. You can't buy the wave tops anymore. It's like you can only buy the one thing from me, plus the puppy course. The puppy course is involved in the big package, but if you want the puppy course just standalone, you can get that because I'm in partnership with Jazz. But the whole point of it is to just have you for sure understand the basics. It's not the fancy stuff, because like what I found, like, a lot of the time when I was learning a lot is people like, I'm going to show you these 6 amazing techniques for luring. And you're like, okay, cool. But what are the pros and cons of luring versus shaping? Because that's more interesting. Right? Like, why are we choosing to luring? Like, okay, cool. Show me your techniques. They're rad. Like, they're fucking great. But they're not going to help if I don't really understand why we're doing this. And like, what is the mechanism? What's our reinforcement schedules? Why do they look that way? How are we priming the dog for this? How are we communicating with the dog? Have we sure that the motivation's in check? How do we build that motivation? Right. So like that kind of stuff, it all ended up rolling into this giant package. And it's this package that I've decided has layers. So like that wave tops, the overview is the part that I made free. And it's like an hour-long video of me explaining dog training. It's like, a quick reference guide on everything I know as quick as I can say it. But then there's the next layer, which is the wave tops, which is, what was the seminar. It's 6 hours of me just talking. But then there's the deep dives, and it's all the same information. It's all the same headings, but it's just in more detail as we go. And then when we go into the deep dives, it's all the practical demonstrations and the explanations and the full session breakdowns and showing all the case studies and showing things all the way through. So it's taken me 2 years to make this, right? It's taken me from the day I decided, okay, I'm on the clock, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get a place, I'm going to set up to do it. It's taken me 2 years. It's been really fun, and it's now ready to go. I've got people buying it already. It's for sale. People can check it out. It's on my website, seriousdogbusiness.com. You can get into the free section, and then if you choose to, you can get into the real.
What's the course called? What did you call it?
I called it Everything Pat Knows. I ended up calling it because that's what it is. It just became like literally everything I know, and taught in a way that develops this strong foundation. So by the time you're learning the technical or the like cool stuff, you've got this strong foundation in the basics that you can just do on autopilot.
So important. Important.
Yeah. So the reason I'm sort of into all this was now I'm at the boring part of all this, right? So like making the course has been fun and the training and all that. That's great. I love doing that. Now I'm at the build out the website, make the email sequence bullshit, right? And so like, I don't know anything about this stuff. I'm not a sales guy. I'm pretty good at making content and I'm good at dog training, but like writing emails and shit, I don't know anything about. And because ChatGPT, I put into my version the first 308 transcripts of the podcast, right? So a guy that listens to the show, Adnan, he gave them to me, the transcripts, because he works in AI, and I plugged them into ChatGPT. And so it has listened or has read the transcripts of 308 episodes of me and you talking, right?
Holy shit.
And for people who are listening and people who have listened to every episode, you sort of like can kind of vaguely remember, Pat's kind of explained his journey through dog training. And it's, you've probably heard me evolve and contradict myself many times. And, because we've changed. We've been doing this for like 7 years. And in those 7 years, I've really changed as a trainer, changed as people. The world has changed significantly, right? Like it's a really different place. But ChatGPT read all this shit in 10 seconds, right? Took in 308 episodes in 10 seconds and then starts telling me about all my fucking contradictions in myself, right? And so we've been having this back and forth as I'm trying to get it to help me write like marketing emails to try and sell shit. And it's been fascinating to see it explaining to me, like, you have really changed. Like, you have really sort of spun around on how you talk about things and how it all comes together. But ultimately what it ended up telling me was that your core principles are the same. Like, everything is that you've got to really understand it. You've got to have a strong foundation. And that's what we're sort of, like the emails, that's what it's kind of all about is I'm calling the course Everything Pat Knows. And it's what I wish I had 10 years ago. Like when I left the army, if I had access to this, I would be at this level within, 6 weeks, maybe 6 months of leaving the army. I would be at the level I'm at now 10 years later because I've hard fought and earned and worked through all this information and practiced teaching it and all this kind of stuff. But it was funny having this conversation with ChatGPT about the various training methods that I have identified with and the different labels I've put on myself along the way. For anybody who's like like we get those poor people who have just found the podcast and are binging it and like, God, I would hate to be listening to me and you.
They love it though. Like some of them are really, I mean, look, I know we've got our people who aren't our biggest fans, but we've also got people who've like binged it and then sent me a message through Insta or something like that saying, dude, I just listened to you and Pat. I'm desperately waiting for you to upload the next episodes because I feel like
I'm running out.
Mate, I get that. I'm like that with Clarkson's Farm and other things that I like watching as well. Like I'm thinking, what's the next evolution? Like, what are they doing next? Yeah. Where are they? And, we've got to really pour our heart and soul out onto some, genuinely intense conversations that we've or feelings or thinkings that we've had over those 7 years. That's the sort of thing that I was talking about before. That's one of the things that I've had this enduring friendship with you and many of my other friends are that same sort of people as well, is they're not thin-skinned people who can't take constructive and loving criticism or even hard criticism sometimes. If I look back at the personality types of people that I've endured with, it's people that I don't have to walk on eggshells around or people that aren't disingenuous. Like there are some people that are in this industry for all the wrong reasons. Like they truly are evil-hearted people. And there's others who are some of the most incredible, wonderful people that you could ever meet in your life. And like you was talking about before, and like you, I've learned things from them that I can never repay that debt. Not only about being a better dog trainer, but just a better human. Like in conversations I've had with them and the fellowship that I've shared with them, I thought, my God, the little things that I've picked up from these people or this person has forever changed. It's given me a course correction that's just made me a better human being. In just thinking about that little thing that they said or that compliment they paid or even that constructive criticism that they've given me. Now, if I think on it, now I make sure I let people know that too. Like the people who are meaningful or remarkable, I make sure that I let them know because I think it's an important thing. And I know that when you do things like this with your courses and the work that you do, and someone like Jazz, for argument's sake, like you are very appreciative of the people around you and the people who've meant something to you and the people that have assisted you along the way. And those things are important because better now than at their eulogy when they have no idea that they meant something to you. And it's very, very important that these things are very important that you'll, like as people that start dropping off, as your age increases and those meaningful people are in your life, good mentors, good bosses, people who gave you an opportunity. There are people who gave me an opportunity that I may not have really appreciated them in person, but they gave me a start. They gave me an opportunity. Even those people, I have the respect for them to go back and saying, hey, mate, it's because of you I got to go here or I got this job or I got this opportunity. And I just want you to know that changed my life and I really appreciate it. The emphasis here, mate, is what you're giving people, all of that collective knowledge and fast tracking that helps them avoid a lot of those unnecessary conversations and getting caught with people who just don't have your best intentions. Like I said, I'm paying a compliment to all of the wonderful people and the dog industry really is full of some really genuine, loving people. But there's also some monsters out there. People, the only thing that they really offer you is Sodom and Gomorrah. They offer you temptation. They offer you like a place to go where it's a sinful environment, if that makes sense. where there are other people who, like I said, the reason that they're having hard conversations with you is because they want you to rise to be a better version of yourself. And I've said this about you before too, mate, because you're one of those people who has helped me become a better version myself by being honest with me and helping me through some times where I've struggled and times where I've had some pretty dark thoughts on things. You've been one of those persons who's kindly repaid me and sat down and said, you should think about this in a different way. One of the interesting things that I learned from you early on is when you told me about one of the commanders in the army or somebody who was involved in your training who went and turned your PowerPoint slide off when you prepared all that information. Like, I've carried that with me for such a long time because it makes me think, you know, when I'm trying to teach somebody things at work, do I know this enough that if the power went down or I didn't have access to things online? Because I've seen people do that where they've choked and struggled and lost their momentum because it's not something that's dear enough to them. It's just something that they're regurgitating off online content. Whereas when you really, truly embrace something, it becomes entwined with your DNA. It's something that, you know, like it sits within you, it resides within you. And it's very important that you get that out because, as I've maintained, it's not my saying, but it's the saying of wisdom, is that if you have that knowledge, if you have that institutional wisdom or that something that is important for humanity to go forward or even dogs to lead their better life, then it is your responsibility to pass that on, to give it away, you know? And I mean, it's such a fucking important thing to do. And I've been so blessed and thankful for the people that have been of that mindset because I never would have progressed. You never would have progressed. And many of the other people who are along their way in whatever journey they're doing and becoming a dog trainer, you just wouldn't have progressed without somebody giving up that information that they work so hard to find. So for all those people involved in that, if I haven't expressly thanked you along the way, I am now.
So I reckon that's my whole story of my sort of journey. And the punchline is that ChatGPT told me it was okay to change and that it demonstrates growth.
I think you knew that anyway, though, without ChatGPT telling you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But I think the main thing, like what I wanted to get across as I do talk about this course, like obviously I want people to buy it, and you can check it out on my website and there are probably links in the description or whatever. But I think the thing that I'm really happy about is there's no dogma in it. And that's what that's what I wanted to avoid because I think that's the biggest problems that we face in the dog training world. So like the whole course to me is like, hey, this is some facts. There's a whole fact section of like, this is immutable. This is, I can point you to the references, but then there's like, hey, this is what I think, is what I feel. And this is like how like it works for me. There's a whole pros and cons section where I am like, hey, like there's tons of things that work. You just got to figure out which one works for you, right? There's no right or wrong here. There's just varied degrees of success and you got to choose which one you're capable of doing and then go along those lines.
Yeah, yeah.
So if people want to check it out, that'd be great. But it is, to me, it's a bit scary thing. It's why I wanted to talk about it, not just to promote it, but also like to sort of think it's kind of my life's work. It's everything that I've spent the last 10 years learning since leaving the army. This is everything all rolled into one package, all put together and like, hey, here it is. This is everything I know. And that's why I called it that. And it'll grow, right? Like I'll keep changing it and putting more stuff in there. And if I change my mind and the way the course is structured, it'll keep growing. It'll get bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes. So anyway, that's my story about it.
Once again, to relay on that importance of things, like having shared a timeline with creative people and learning from them like yourselves and even my wife, one of the things that I have learned, especially from you and Narelle over the last couple of years that I've been, watching and listening and hearing your evolution on what you're doing, is that you're sharing a very deep part of your soul. And that's where really good education comes from. That's where you'll often find the best of a product or a service or information that you're doing, is that you're not working with people who are just doing it because it's just a money spinner or something, that they're just throwing it out there. It's like, this is something that I have spent my life gathering, like some of the best of, not only some of, but the best of what I have actually seen, like evidence-based subject matter that really incredibly talented people have pulled together. And this is my dissemination of it. And here it is, it's available. I've seen people that have worked with you, and I've seen people work with other, incredible trainers over time. And I've seen people who have worked with Narelle and they're bearing fruit from it. And they're coming back and saying, my life got better. My dog's life got better. Because my dog's life got better, my life got better. And I said, isn't that an interesting thing that when you actually invest in the labors of talented and integral people, how things will actually change around it for the better?
Yeah. Yeah. Reminds me, you don't get results from work you're not doing. That's part of it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I reckon that's a good place to wrap it up.
Hey,
you got anything else to add?
I do. I just want to do a shout out, and not that they would have wanted me to, but my friend Melanie, who lives in the United States, her dog Mongo passed away. And there's lots of people whose...
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's lots of people whose dogs have passed away that I know, but I had a relationship with Mongo. He was a sort of dog that took a little while to shine to you, but when he did shine to you, like he really took a loving to you. And I remember when I got stuck in United States when COVID happened, and I actually caught COVID over there or whatever it was, but like it's all fingers point to COVID. Mongo sat with me on the couch and he just loved on me the entire time, and I was fucking miserable. Poor Melanie and Jason had to work around me, and we had things planned, and my life was really sucking at that point in time. I'd gone all the way over there. I was really looking forward to spending time with friends and doing some experiences, but he's a bit of an old hard ass Mongo, but he got up on the couch and just sat with me and nuzzled up to me. And I really enjoyed his company, and him and I sort of bonded quite strongly over that time. I was quite heartbroken about it because him and Randy were the same age. And when we went back over there again, Melanie was worried because he was getting old and he was getting lumps and bumps all over him. But he made it, and we got to see him again. I got to introduce him to Narelle. And Mel, I just want you to know, for you and Jace, I'm deeply saddened at the loss. He wasn't just a dog, he was a friend. So just to end that, just to close off on that, there are a lot of dogs that don't belong to us, but we've become friends with. And it has an impact on us as well. So when our friends lose their dogs who have become our friends as well, we've lost a friend. So I lost a friend, and Melanie and Jason lost a family member who was very important to them. So rest in peace, Mongo. You're a good old dog, and I'll miss you.
That's sad.
Yep.
All right. I'll do the wrap up. Yep. That's it for another episode of Canine Paradigm. As always, if you like what you hear, just like, rate, share, subscribe. Do that through whatever subscription service you download us from, and then go to another one. Do it there. Don't check. You can do whatever you want. No one's the boss of you. Do what you like. Go crazy. If you want to spoil the show.
Well, unless you work for somebody, then they're the boss of you. And then what do you do about that?
They're not really. You just mutiny, rampage, anarchy. If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is to jump into Patreon. A couple bucks a month gets you a giant backlog of information as well as new stuff going forward. We do live streams and all kinds of stuff in there. If you want to support me, you can buy my course, seriousdogbusiness.com. If you want to get in touch with us. Oh, and T-shirts, get in the spring. Links in the show notes. You get into there. There's plenty of
tapestries,
cool merch, wall tapestries, all kinds of stuff. But if you want to get in touch with us, the best way to do that is jump into the Facebook discussion group. It's called the Canine Paradigm discussion group. And there's lots of really cool conversations in there. You can group source information. But if you want to get in touch with us directly, you can shoot us an email. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. Love you all, and I hope your dogs live forever. Goodbye.
We'll be right back.